You are looking good. You who are 3 steps above average. I'm Kendall Bryan Hunter, and this is the Eyes of Faith podcast, where I talk about news, events, and cultural trends from the perspective of faith. So the breaking news is the feds are investigating the LA mayor's race, alleging election fraud. Anyone find that surprising? That there may be fraud going on, or there's an investigation. War front, more negotiations. Think about this. Donald Trump's a negotiator, so he has a home court advantage when you're negotiating. So, some things to think about. First of all, is this a war? Secondly, what are the boundary conditions? And then thirdly, boundary conditions, how do you determine, how do you know that we've won it? If it is a war or just a skirmish. Think long term. Donald Trump's a lame duck, and the Mideast is very patient, and modern society is fragile. Well, with that, let's jump into the lead story, which is Washington's farewell address. Now, I've read this several times beforehand, but it's just refreshing to reread it as I was finishing up the collection of George Washington's writings, his papers. And that's a good book to read this year, celebrating the 250th. The semi-quincentennial. And in it, he talks about a lot of things. I'm going to focus on 3 points. One, I should say about the American identity. And he writes, the name of American, which belongs to you in your national capacity, must always exalt the just pride, that word again, of patriotism more than any appellation derived from local discriminations. With slight shades of difference, you have the same religion, manners, habits, and political principles. You have in a common cause fought and triumphed together. The independence and liberty you possess are the work of joint councils and joint efforts, of common dangers, suffering, and successes. Now this idea of a common culture, that's talked about in Common Sense. This book here, get a chance to read Common Sense by Thomas Paine. It's a short book, very powerful. And it's what convinced Washington to break away from England. It's also discussed in Federalist, too, in the Federalist Papers. The idea of borders, language, and culture. Remember, it's not race, but culture. Now, think about that. Not race, but culture. And how people have confused race with culture. Race, that's about your body, but culture is about your mind. Think about it this way. Where would you rather start a business? In California or the United Arab Emirates? Well, the United Arab Emirates. Well, California has a closer culture as being part of America and different than the different history that the United Arab Emirates has. But what's the difference? They have a business-friendly culture. It's the culture, not the race. Never confuse the two. The next thing that Washington talks about, and this is a little bit lengthy, is party, faction, and combinations. And the thing about that should tickle your ears, tingle your spine when you hear George Washington talking about combinations. But also, he puts it in the same dynamic as party, faction, and combinations. Also talked about in Federalist 10. Says Washington, in contemplating the causes which may disturb our union, it occurs as a matter of serious concern that any ground should have been furnished for characterizing parties by geographic discriminations, northern, southern, Atlantic, and western, whence designing men may endeavor to excite a belief that there's a real difference of local interest and views. He's talking about America, so it's eastern seaboard, 13 colonies. You have the colonies, you have the inlands, you have the north and south, the different economies. And this is the basis for the Electoral College, is that you have these regional and sectional differences, which are apparent. 13 states on one side, then on the other side of the country you have 3 states, California, and then 2 of the suburbs of California, Washington and Oregon, then you have Alaska and Hawaii, 49 and 50. And very different. We have different interests and a very different situation than the other side of the country, and this can divide us. But that's the power of the Electoral College. The Electoral College actually unifies us. Continues Washington. One of the expedients of party to acquire influence within particular districts is to misrepresent the opinions and aims of other districts. That sound familiar? To the efficacy and permanency of your union, a government of the whole is indispensable. all obstructions to the execution of the laws, all combinations and associations under whatever plausible character with the real design to direct, control, counteract, or awe the regular deliberation and action of the constituted authorities are destructive to this fundamental principle and of fatal tendency. You see, that's one of the most saddest things in the history is the party divisions. Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, party divisions. How many people have left the church or gone inactive over party divisions? Washington was warning about these things. Continuing, they serve to organize faction, to give it an artificial and extraordinary force, to put, in the place of the delegated will of the nation, the will of a party, often a small but artful, enterprising minority of the community. This is what's called the Pareto principle, 80-20 principle, that political party, 80% of the people are just there, 20% of the people are most active. And it just takes an active small minority, a creative minority, energized minority, to change things, that 20%. And that's what political parties and factions do. And according to the alternative triumph of different parties, to make the public administration the mirror of the ill-concerted and incongruous project of faction, rather than the organ of consistent and wholesome plans digested by common councils and modified by mutual interest. That's what happens. This 20%, this energized faction just controls things, and it screws up the country. We start these special interest groups. Is that a better term? Does that sound a little bit familiar? Special interest groups mandating stuff. So let me do there. My phone's a little bit sluggish. Continuing, however, combinations or associations of the above description may now and then answer popular ends, they are likely in the course of time and things to become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reign of government, destroying afterwards the very engines which have lifted them to unjust dominion. As of that, what's going on, people get in power, they start changing the laws around. The Gadianton robbers did that. They got sole management of the government among the Nephites and started corrupting the laws to keep themselves in power. Washington, towards the preservation of your government and the permanency of your present happy state, it is requisite not only that you steadily discountenance irregular oppositions to this acknowledged authority, but also that you resist with care the spirit of innovation upon the principles, however specious the pretext. One method of assault may be to effect in the forms of the Constitution alterations which may impair the energy of the system, and thus to undermine that which cannot be directly overthrown. So what he's saying is, these faction come around, they start changing the Constitution. Once again, the Gadianton robbers corrupting the laws. Think about ranked choice voting. Does that change things? Does that change the rules of the game? What about in the years of elections? Courts redrawing election districts, which has happened here in Provo. Representative Kennedy, he got drawn out of my voting out of my district. I can't vote for him because these special interest groups were able to persuade a court to change the voting districts. Liberty itself will find in such a government with powers properly distributed and adjusted, its surest garden. The spirit of party, unfortunately, is inseparable from our nature, having its root in the strongest passion of the human mind. It's a human nature question. In the social contract, Rousseau says, man is born free and is everywhere in change. The problem is not human nature, it's just the structure. Well, if humans have good nature, why do they create bad structure? And Rousseau's idea collapses. Spirit of party, exists under different shapes in all governments and more or less stifled, controlled, or repressed. But in those of popular form, it is seen in its greatest rankness and is truly their worst enemy. The altered domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, little juicy there, the revenge, politics of revenge, natural to party dissension, which in different ages and countries has perpetuated the most horrid enormities, is itself a frightful despotism. But this leads at length to a more formal and permanent despotism. Alex de Tocqueville, in his book on America, the name slips me. Okay, it's Tocqueville, talked about this, that you have a soft tyranny where you're getting micromanaged. The state is your mommy changing your diaper. Democracy in America, de Tocqueville. Get an abridged version. The original's a little bit long, but there's abridged versions there. But give that a read. The disorders and miseries which result gradually incline the minds of men to seek security and repose in the absolute power of an individual. What the Book of Mormon teaches about kings. A king is your daddy. Sometimes the queen's your mommy, and your mommy takes care of you, so makes all these difficult decisions. And people are just trying to avoid responsibility. Elder Lynn Robbins gave that devotional at BYU about responsibility. Give that one a read. I'm throwing stuff at you. Use common sense with my suggestions. Without looking forward to an extremity of this kind, which nevertheless ought not be entirely out of sight, the common and continual mischiefs of the spirit of party are sufficient to make it the interest and duty of wise people to discourage and restrain it. It serves always to distract the public councils, enfeeble the public administration. It agitates the community with ill-founded jealousies and false alarms, kindles the animosity of one part against another, foments occasionally riot and insurrection. Wait a minute. Secret combinations and insurrection. Well, son of a gun. It opens the door to foreign influence and corruption. Somali welfare fraud. Then Somalis going in contrast to protect the welfare fraud from functioning. The political officials, which find a facilitated access through the government itself through the channels of party passions. Thus the policy and the will of one country are subjected to the policy and will of another. A fire not to be quenched, it demands a uniform vigilance to prevent its bursting into a flame, lest, instead of warming, it should consume. Does that tickle your interest? You want to go out there and you can find it online. I think it's Dover Thrift Edition, as his book is called, the Declaration of Independence and Other American Documents. That's a good handbook to read. It's Dover Thrift Edition's Declaration of Independence and Washington's address in it. That's sort of a cheap thing you can get. Maybe that's the proper starter kit. So religion. Third point, of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. In vain would that man claim to tribute the tribute of patriotism who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness, these firmest props of duties of men and citizens. The mere politician, equally with the pious man, ought to respect and cherish them. And let us with caution indulge that supposition that morality can be made without religion. Whatever may be conceded to the influence of refined education on the minds of particular structure, reason and experience both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in exclusion of religious principle. So he's using a lot of double negatives there, but when saying you need to have faith, he continues, it's substantially true that virtue or morality is a necessary spring of popular government. The rule indeed extends with more or less force to every species of free government. Who, that is a sincere friend to it, can look with indifference upon attempts to shake the foundations of the fabric. This is an interesting thing. Do you need to be a person of faith to be a good American? Can you have an ethical system independent of religion? Well, yeah, Aristotle came up with one, the character-based ethic. Immanuel Kant's system, deontological. You have the utilitarian of Bentham and John Stuart Mill. So those three systems are atheistic. But is that enough? President Nelson, in his book Accomplishing the Impossible, talks about that. And we love our atheist neighbors. We will work with you. there's good causes. An atheist can demand a food, man a food bank just as well as a person of faith. And we'll work with those types of connections. Other cases, we may not be able to find common ground, but we'll still love you as a neighbor with Christian love. So that's Washington's farewell address. You can feel that you need to get it right now. You just, especially that part about secret combinations, you'll rethink things. So news blips. Counting votes in L.A. The reason why it's taking so long, of course, is they're trying to print more ballots. That's a joke. That's a joke. Federal investigating, and this reminds me of. So you had this natural disaster at the Pacific Palisades. This fire there, but it reminded me back in 2005 with Hurricane Katrina, flooding of the 19th Ward in New Orleans. The mayor, school bus Ray Nagin. What happened is they needed to evacuate people in this poor neighborhood, and it didn't happen. And these pictures showed up of these school buses that were flooded, and they could have gotten the school buses to move people out of there, and they chose not to. He later was indicted on 21 counts of corruption. He gave that interesting speech called "A Chocolate City." We want to build New Orleans as a chocolate city. Is that racist? Is there a double standard? Can someone who's black make racial statements? We give them a pass because of the heritage of slavery and their different experience from other people, from white people? Or do we need to hold people to the same standard? Governor Kathleen Blanco, quickly replaced by Bobby Jindal. What happened to him? Dinesh D'Souza, he has been doing some films, got arrested, did some prison time. Bobby Jindal, he's sort of the lightning rod, the boy wonder for a bit. I started to see he's disappeared, so he's a good man. He could still come up. But are there some commonalities with New Orleans in 2005 and Los Angeles? Are there some common elements there, like with the Democrats running the city? Is there something there? Is that just apophenia? Is that confirmation bias? Am I just seeing things? Am I being hypnotized by my political party? Well, you can, of course, form your own opinion. News blip, my crypto wallet's down 50%. I never took it seriously in the first place. I am losing money, but it was just... what you do is... to make it round numbers, you have 10. You invest in 10 different things. 2 or 3 of them are really successful, so those cover the loss of the 7 other. Same thing with publishing. Publishers will publish a lot of books, and it's once again the Pareto's principle. You have publish 100 books, only 20 of them do really well, and those cover the cost of the printing of the 80 other books. This week, SpaceX is giving its IPO. I think it's about 135 for that. If you missed with Tesla, this might be your chance to Tesla in outer space. So I'm not a broker. This is not financial advice. I'm just talking about things from a person of faith. Stock with Tesla or with SpaceX, it's not going to be useful right now. 70 to 100 years from now, it will be useful and expensive and valuable. Think about Ford Motor Company. Ford Motor Company's initial IPO, back when it started, over 100 years ago, and what Ford Motor Company stock is worth now. If you had just bought 3 shares, what would those 3 shares be worth? And have your chatbot run it down. As always, ignore me and talk to someone who really knows what they're doing with personal finances. Not surprising news. The not surprising news is LA can't count ballots. We're not surprised by that, are we? America 250. So I'm double dipping right here. I did Washington's farewell address, but it's coming up in a month, so I'm going to do some double time right now. Americans, the Americans' Creed. You may not have heard of it. We're familiar with the Pledge of Allegiance, but what happened? This is around 1917, so over 100 years ago. around the time of World War I, and President Woodrow Wilson was doing a push for patriotism. Of course, I will not say this is a government psyop. I'd never say that. Although, certainly government does have an obligation to inculcate patriotism in its citizenry, not just to make them susceptible to wanting to be drafted, but for national cohesion, which is this national culture that Washington talked about. So apparently they had this contest for someone to sum up what it means to be an American. And what went out was this writing by William Tyler Page. He apparently was related to the other famous Tyler. Have your chat bot look up the other famous Tyler. And this is what it says. I believe in the United States of America as a government of the people, by the people, for the people, whose just powers are derived from the consent of the governed, a democracy and a republic, a sovereign nation of many sovereign states, a perfect union, one and inseparable, established upon those principles of freedom, equality, justice, and humanity, for which American patriots sacrificed their lives and fortunes. I therefore believe it is my duty to my country to love it, to support its Constitution, to obey its laws, to respect its flag, and to defend it against all enemies. Written in 1917, accepted by the United States House of Representatives, April 3rd, 1918. So think about that. Is that a good summary? Democracy and a republic. Let me tell you something. Let's get this debate. Are we a democracy or are we a republic? If you call it a democracy, the Democrats have legitimacy. If you call it a republic, the Republicans have legitimacy. That's what that whole discussion is about. Federalist 10 explains what a republic is. Culture comment. Actually, this coughing thing's been a blessing. As you can tell, it's getting better, but I'm cutting these down, so I'm not putting myself through agony. Death of Anthony Head. TV's Giles from Buffy. I didn't watch it. I was an executive secretary in a student ward, so we'd have this office, and there's a TV there, so we had this gal come in, just sit there, and she'd watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer, so I developed an awareness of it, but not really a fanboy of it. Giles. Rupert Giles. A little bit not as creepy as Donald Sutherland as Merrick. The Watcher Merrick, Donald Sutherland. Buffy, you're supposed to kill the vampires, not fall in love with them. All our best to the family of Anthony Head. Stargate SG-1. Was that MGM owns the property? And they were thinking about doing a revival series, but it got nixed or put on hold. Michael Shanks, who is TV's Daniel Jackson, is certainly pushing for it. It's interesting because you remember he left the series because he didn't like the way his character was going, and I have to admit that he was right. They didn't know what to do with Daniel Jackson. He's a bit hard to write for because of Jack O'Neill, Colonel O'Neill. He's just the leader, so he just leads stuff, orders people to blow up things, and figures his way out of stuff, and Teal just blows up stuff. Captain Major Colonel Carter, just technobabble, and then do a woman's relationships issues with her. But Daniel Jackson, if I was going to write him, if you ever read Charles Darwin's Voyage of the Beagle, that gives you an idea how you should write Daniel Jackson. It's interesting because Darwin's there and he's looking at the rocks and he's talking about it. His interest is on these natural things, not so much on people relationships. But yeah, he's an interesting character. Of course, I don't want to resonate with him. I have a degree in history, so I like Daniel Jackson. But it's interesting because the debate is we want to bring a series back because we liked it. I have to admit, I saw the movie Stargate, the original one with Kurt Russell, and I kind of liked it. As Star Trek Generations was a barfaholic, but Stargate, yeah, I kind of liked the movie. Upon rewatching it, I saw how you have the two mirror characters, Jack O'Neill and Daniel Jackson. They're mirror characters because they have the same name, and they're different paths and how they interact with each other, and they both find a bit of closure. Jack O'Neill heals from his son's suicide. Daniel Jackson gets his theories legitimized. Wonderful movie. You sit there and it stands analysis is very well written. I never saw the series because in the 90s I was in college and I was doing other things at the time. So last year I saw all 10 seasons, so I am a fan, committed fan to the series and the concept. At some point I will watch the other series, Stargate Atlantis and Stargate Universe. But the dilemma is, do you want this to be like the Rings of Power? Do you want this to be like Starfleet Academy? Because that's the direction Hollywood's going. They still haven't learned their lesson. I didn't see The Mandalorian and Grogu the first time in my life. I did not see a Star Wars movie. Won't see Supergirl. Maybe Disclosure Day will get me off my derriere into the theater, but there's just no interest. I've just written Hollywood off. So, on one sense, it would be nice to see more material. Although I'm not sure how they could make it fresh. That's an interesting question because 10 seasons and 3 series. That's a lot of material. It gets redundant. On the other hand, I just don't want it to turn into Doctor Who or Starfleet Academy or The Acolyte. Battlestar Galactica. So I hit episode 3 right now, Bastille Day. Opening scene. So this is the second episode in a row where we see Colonel John McCain, or Ty, agonizing over his liquor. Just an alcoholic, and he's just, I'm running out of liquor. Apparently, Starbuck doesn't go through nicotine withdrawal for some reason. Although they did have the scene with Baltar and his slender cigarettes and such, but she doesn't have any nicotine withdrawal. But apparently, McCain does. As usual, the women have all the answers. Starbuck and Starbuck alone can lead the strike team to the ship. Richard Hatch. Richard Hatch is terrorist Tom Zarek. Now, he did a passion project in the 1990s called Battlestar Galactica, The Second Coming. And about their time, I think there were about 3 ideas with the series. The Battlestar Galactica, they wanted to do something that was good property, hokey. I'll admit, the first 5 episodes of the original series were great. Starbuck Returns, great. Everything else is just mediocre. It's more of a kid's show, which was okay as a kid at the time. But he did this passion project called Battlestar Galactica, The Second Coming, which would be a continuation of the original series. They even had the original Colonel Ty there, I think, and also John Colicos, the original Baltar. Also, he's the original Klingon, too. That you had the let's just reboot it, which is one who won out. But there's also remember reading about people wanting to do a Battlestar Galactica focused on the Battlestar Pegasus, one where they had Lloyd Bridges, and I think once again they have a female captain in the rebooted series. Not surprising news. So my initial reaction when I saw that they had Richard Hatch play the evil terrorist, I thought, wow, this is great. Subverting our expectations. The hero from the last series is now the villain. And giving an actor a chance to play an evil person, it's actually good for the actor. Think of Heath Ledger as Joker, or William Marshall, who played Dr. Daystrom from Star Trek, The Ultimate Computer, the original series. You get these actors, because they have a black actor playing the villain, but he's really perfect at the madness, going to the madness, and it's just a great vehicle for them. And it's a different energy, and it's healthy for the actors to do this. But the next day, I was thinking about it, thought, wait a second, this is so you have another white man, and he's evil. This, of course, is just confirmation bias and apophenia. I'm just seeing things. There's nothing there. This is just confirmation. I just happen to see all the white men as evil people. It's just confirmation bias. This is just like Han Solo and Luke Skywalker from Star Wars. They both become deadbeat dads. The heroes from the original series now become the villains. Even though Hatch is playing a different character, Hatch the hero is now Hatch the villain. I think it's interesting, so close to 9/11, that you have this terrorist getting involved with people making deals. Moral complexity. President Joseph F. Smith said this. in his book Doctrines of Salvation, page 374, there's a deplorable tendency among the people of this nation to sympathize with murderers, bank defaulters, evil adventurers, and hundreds of other classes of criminals who are at large or who have been arrested or convicted for breaking the law. Such a tendency is not alone manifest among the people of the various states and territories of the unions. It is also apparent among the Latter-day Saints. This sympathy for criminals is entirely abnormal and has a tendency to lower than destroy the moral sentiment of any people who indulge in it. For a Latter-day Saint to sympathize either with crime or with criminals is a burning shame, and it is high time that the teachers of the community should stem such tendency and inculcate a sentiment that would make it extremely abhorrent to commit crime. That's the whole point with Breaking Bad, isn't it? Is that you glamorize a criminal. Jean Valjean. He's not evil. He's just a victim of circumstance. All criminals are just victims of circumstances. No one's accountable. There's no such thing as right or wrong, just hurt feelings. And that's what this does. So on one hand, it's very good entertainment, but it does bring a message. These are people to be hated. And they bring that up in the episode. He's a terrorist, or let's just work with him. Although it's kind of funny, the President Rosalind says, okay, let's just work with his organization. Then, 20 minutes later, she says, well, he's just a terrorist. So let's look at the race card right now with Battlestar Galactica. Colonel John McCain, drunk deadbeat dad, and he cheats at cards. Tyrell, he's the mechanic of the Vipers. He's a condescending boss. Loki Judas Baltar, a svelte genius. He has this head addiction to svelte woman, svelte blondes. I'm glad they cut back the ear nibbling. That would just sort of getting annoying. So he's a genius, but he's not smart enough to outsmart this Cylon implant in his brain. Okay, and then now, number 4, white male, corrupting the hero of the original series, the original source material, and he's a terrorist. We're at half an hour. Let's wind this up. Life's some pointers. Phrase, ingenious workarounds. Ingenious workarounds. You can get the same result, but use different means. Some people get locked into doing things a certain way, my way or no way, as President Nelson talked about it. But you have what you want and the means to get it. There's different ways to get the same or a similar result without getting locked into one position. So another habit to think about is, okay, how can we do a workaround? If we can't get things one way, can we get it the other way? Here we're at the end. E-devotional. Church and state, faith and freedom fallacies. Separation of church and state versus faith and freedom. Does the First Amendment make faith illegal? Can only atheists and agnostics hold elected office in America? Is it the job of the federal government to protect citizens from organized religion and people of faith? Some people think that's all true. That's not. So in the Constitution, you have the First Amendment, what's called the Establishment Clause, that Congress cannot establish a religion, make a state religion like they have in other countries like England or in Scandinavia. Then you have the Free Exercise Clause. Free exercise, it's just not holding certain beliefs, but able to publicly express those beliefs, to exercise them. And that's where the problem comes in, is people think freedom of belief. No, it's free exercise. We have beliefs, but we can express our beliefs. Think about Cardinal Richelieu in France, and then Cardinal Wolsey in England. These Catholic priests or cardinals, leaders of the Catholic faith, and how they happen to stick their finger in a lot of pies in government. And that's what we're warned about, is the influence of people like Cardinal Wolsey or Cardinal Richelieu. That they cause some problems with the government. Who appoints the bishop, the crown, or the pope? That's actually an issue in the Middle Ages. I'm sorry, I was adjusting the lighting. Let me tell you something. Remember, I do this low-key. I do this on the fly. This is the Garage Band podcast. I don't have any sponsors, so I'm not beholden to anyone. A couple of days ago, I was listening to Glenn Beck's podcast, and I was a bit disturbed. I heard one of the sponsors was Flying Aces Bourbon. So Glenn Beck's a recovering alcoholic. He's a member of the church. And one of the sponsors, and this wasn't him sponsoring or reading a commercial. Someone else was reading the commercial, but it was Through the Blaze, which is his company. It was Flying Aces Bourbon. Recovering alcoholic has a commercial for bourbon. Recovering alcoholic who's a member has a commercial for bourbon on his channel. Yeah, that's why I don't do. I'll take donations. I'll take grants, but no sponsors. I need to keep this pure. You, me, and the truth. So back to separation of church and state. Colonies were religiously exclusive, Quakers in Pennsylvania, etc. Now here's the thing. We get locked into something. We're fighting a battle. It's nativity scenes on public squares. Well, you can put up a nativity scene on your house, and in fact, think about that. People want because they want to legitimize. If it's on City Hall, it gives legitimacy to your faith. It's like when people during testimony meeting they pop off because the pulpit gives them legitimacy. You get legitimacy there. So, do you want to have one nativity scene on City Hall, or how about 500 nativity scenes with every member of your ward, and people of Catholic and Protestants having nativity scenes, which is going to be more impactful? Which is going to be the brilliant supernova of light, where you have one on City Hall or 500 in your city. Not only the same, a better result using different means. Another thing too with the Ten Commandment monuments. After the film Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston and Yul Brynner, Eagles organizations went around and put all these Ten Commandment monuments in public places. Then a couple of years later, a couple of decades later, they suddenly become this is an atrocity having the Ten Commandments on this land, so they removed them. What they did in Provo is they had the Ten Commandments were on a veterans park. What they did is they took it off there, they put it on the temple grounds. And if you saw the Neil Anderson video about the Ten Commandments, that's where he filmed it, is at the Provo City Center Temple, right next to the Ten Commandments monuments. So if you're a rich member, think about this. Why don't you just buy up all these Ten Commandment monuments if they're for sale? Talk with the church, see if you can get these Ten Commandment monuments put on temple properties. We got plenty of temples. It certainly would be sends a good message about the Ten Commandments. Well, government doesn't want them. We'll take them. I don't have the means or the ability or the money to do this, but if someone does, please pick up this idea. Don't even mention me. Just keep credit to yourself. That's an ingenious workaround, and that's a good habit to develop. Well, we're at 38 minutes. My coughing is getting much better. Give it a couple more weeks, and I should be perfect. That's the passing scene. Seen with the eyes of faith. Thank you.